Ramadi falls to ISIS in Iraq, and now they control 60% of Syria. How should the U.S. respond? Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari will tell us. And later, who's behind the current assault on free speech here in the United States? Fox News contributor and author of The Silencing, KRISTEN Powers, will tell us. And the president of the Pontifical Council for the Family, Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, tells us about the Pope's plans for his U.S. and Cuba visits, the upcoming Synod on the Family, and his endorsement of modern family. The World Over Live begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. KRISTEN Powers, Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari, and Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, or if you have a question for one of our guests, tweet them to me at Raymond Arroyo, or you can email us at worldover@EWTN.com. Let's get to it. This is the brief news from the world over this week. Another major Iraqi city falls to ISIS. This past weekend, Islamic State militants overran and captured the city of Ramadi, just west of Baghdad. Some 500 civilians and soldiers were killed in what was an unexpected victory. The Iraqi government is now scrambling for reinforcements, dispatching military, and rallying Iranian-allied Shiite militiamen to join the fight to recapture the capital of the country's largest Sunni province. Since Friday alone, more than 40,000 have fled Ramadi, many forced to take the 80-mile trek east to Baghdad on foot. Meanwhile, Pope Francis's special envoy to Iraq, Cardinal Fernando Filoni, said political and proportional military action are needed. In an interview with Rome Reports, Filoni said that words and good intentions are no longer enough to protect the people of the Middle East. In another stunning triumph on Wednesday, Islamic State militants captured the ancient Syrian town of Palmyra after al-Assad government troops fled the region. Hundreds have been reported killed. Palmyra is home to a renowned historic site and priceless artifacts, some over 2,000 years old. The concern is that ISIS will destroy them, as they have devastated major archaeological sites in Iraq. More on the latest ISIS advance and the U.S. response next. And as migrants continue to pour into Europe from across the Mediterranean, the European Union can't seem to agree on just how to deal with the crisis. A proposal to impose minimum migrant quotas on member states appears to be falling apart after France, Spain, and the UK withdrew their support. EU leaders did agree to use naval forces to intercept and then destroy ships used by smugglers. European navies would then return the migrants to African ports. In the UK, Prime Minister David Cameron unveiled a new bill to make illegal employment a criminal offence.
If you have uncontrolled immigration, you have uncontrolled pressure on public services. And that raises basic issues of fairness. Uncontrolled immigration can damage our labor market and push down wages. And working people rightly want a government that's on their side.
Wages paid to illegal migrants can be seized as proceeds of crime. And some disturbing news for the church in China on Wednesday. Chinese President Xi Jinping warned Communist Party leaders that religion in China must be independent of foreign influence. In a key policy speech, he said China must manage religious affairs and that religions should be incorporated into the socialist society. Since 1957, the communist regime has controlled Catholicism in China via the Chinese Patriotic Catholic Association, which also dictates the appointment of bishops. The Holy See has given approval to some of their bishops, but they've rejected others. Hours later, at his Wednesday audience, Pope Francis urged Catholics in China to, quote, be united to the rock of the Church in Rome. It was unclear whether the Holy Father's comments were aimed at the Chinese president's speech. And in Northern Ireland, A judge has ruled that a Christian-owned bakery discriminated against a customer on the grounds of sexual orientation. Asher's Bakery refused to make a cake carrying the image of Sesame Street's Bert and Ernie below the phrase "support gay marriage." The judge said Asher's was not exempt from the discrimination law because they were conducting a business for profit and are not a religious group. She added that although the owners were genuine and have deeply held religious views, they were not above the law. The bakery has agreed to pay damages of 500 British pounds. From Belfast to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Governor Bobby Jindal on Tuesday issued a religious freedom directive preventing state discrimination against those who might object to providing services for same-sex marriages. The executive order came just hours after a similar bill in the State House died in committee. Jindal said the state should not be able to take adverse action against a person for their belief in traditional marriage. We don't support discrimination in Louisiana, he said, and we do support religious liberty. These two values can be upheld at the same time. A day earlier, Governor Jindal announced that he is forming an exploratory committee for a possible run for the White House. And a federal appeals court has rejected the University of Notre Dame's request that it be exempted from the Obamacare contraceptive mandate while its lawsuit proceeds. In a 2-to-1 decision, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals suggested that the administration accommodation for religious groups was sufficient and that the ball was, quote, now in the government's court. Meanwhile, could the use of birth control pills shrink parts of a woman's brain? New research conducted by UCLA suggests that that might be the case. The study looked at the brains of 90 women, 46 of whom were using the pill. The results showed that oral contraceptive use was connected with a thinning of 2 areas of the cerebral cortex, areas linked to the regulation of emotions and memory. Although the study only looked at changes in brain structure, the findings suggest that there could be effects on behavior as well. And Robert Gates, the former defense secretary, now head of the Boy Scouts of America, is calling for an end of that organization's ban on gay adult leaders. We must deal with the world as it is, not as we might wish it to be, he said. Any other alternative would end us as a movement. Gates made his remarks at the Scouts' national meeting in Atlanta this week. He went on to say that religious organizations that sponsor local Scout troops should be free to set their own policies in choosing leaders. How those religious rights would be balanced against the lifting of a ban remains to be seen. And finally, it appears Jude Law is getting religious for his latest role. 42-year-old British actor Jude Law has been cast as a new conservative American pope for a TV miniseries set at the Vatican. Titled The Young Pope, Law will play Lenny Belardo, an Italian-American thrust into the papacy by Vatican leaders tired of, quote, liberals in the church hierarchy. A press statement released earlier this week at the Cannes Film Festival described Law's character as a complex and conflicted conservative in his choices, yet full of compassion towards the weak and the poor, as if those things are mutually exclusive. A co-production of HBO, Sky, and France's Canal Plus, The Young Pope is set to go into production this summer. Pope Lenny. Boy, don't we have enough problems? When we return, former U.S. Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari on the fall of Ramadi and Palmyra to ISIS. What can be done to stop their advance? He'll tell us when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
As ISIL forces captured and sacked Ramadi, the Pentagon's news page ran a story with the headline, "Strategy to Defeat ISIL is Working." Secretary John Kerry of Secretary of State said Ramadi was a mere, quote, target of opportunity. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said yesterday that we should not, quote, light our hair on fire every time there is a setback in the campaign against ISIL. Meanwhile, Ramadi, Iraq, and the region are on fire.
Welcome back to The World Over. That was Senator John McCain on Capitol Hill yesterday, criticizing the Obama administration for failing to prevent ISIS from taking Ramadi, a city 70 miles west of Baghdad. To discuss the U.S. and regional strategy in dealing with ISIS, I'm joined by retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari via satellite from Chicago. Colonel Sangari, thank you for being here.
It's good to be here.
Let's start with Josh Earnest. He said we need to tweak the strategy. That would be the White House press spokesman. We need to tweak the strategy. What is the strategy, in your opinion?
I don't think your enemies or your friends know what the strategy is, and I think that's where the problem begins. They have to know what the red lines are, and they have to understand if they're crossed, that they will be punished. In this setting, you cannot get to a point where you can even try to negotiate for a positive outcome for the United States. So you have to have a concise strategy. It has to be explained to everybody. The American public has to understand it. And then if we have to go to war in order to accomplish that strategy, Department of Defense, Department of State assets have to be able to gear themselves up to execute it.
Colonel, you trained so many of the Iraqi troops and the people on the ground there. How stable are these, if you will, citizen militias that are on the ground in these towns? They don't seem to be able to repel ISIS or even protect their own homes.
They're not capable, and the reason they're not capable is because we're tying in Iraq at the highest levels. A lot of the guys are basically working in the units specifically to be able to feed their families. Currently, as an example, the Syrians, the Christians that had their own militia, their own military actually fighting in Syria, in Khyber Valley, and then also in the Nimba Plains, they went ahead and did not receive the required weapons, direct support, and finance that they needed to continue. So right now they're fighting under the Kurdish Peshmerga with the Shia and the Sunnis. That being the case, they're fighting in areas that they don't want to fight in. The same is for all other groups that are fighting currently in Iraq. You're not going to be successful that way.
Colonel, is it a mistake for the United States? It seems the strategy, if there is one, the strategy seems to be prop up the Iraqi government and arm the Shiite militias. What impact has that had on other tribes, the Sunnis, and the Christian groups in the region?
What it has done, the perception in the Middle East is that you are fighting in order to support the strategic goals of the Shia within the region. When we were bombing targets in support of the Badr Corps that was taking the oil fields in Kirkuk, that also affected the Kurdish regional government capabilities in the future, we basically told everybody that we're aligning ourselves from the Middle Eastern perspective with the Shia and with Iran. The fact that we take out a target, Abu Sayyaf, recently with our Delta forces, at the same time that the U.S. delegation is going to Iran to negotiate possibility of having a oil agreement after the sanctions are removed with our oil companies, sends the wrong message when it comes to information operations within the region. It tells everybody that you took out Abu Sayyaf only because he was selling oil on the cheap in the region, knowing fully that Abu Sayyaf was in that region to begin with from the beginning of last August.
We should tell people, Colonel, that the Sunnis are, one of their strongholds was Ramadi. And when that fell, what impact does that have on that Sunni population? Now, remember, ISIS is also Sunni, but they're going door to door killing their own religious adherents. Explain the dynamic, how religion, how belief is shaping what we're seeing unfolding here, and is the administration missing this dimension?
I think the administration is missing it, but it goes across the bounds regardless if it's Democratic or Republican. You have to understand there's 6 billion people on this planet. There's 12 billion sets of eyes are looking at the American flag and wanting to see what America has been able to accomplish within the region. So when you talk about Yemen, Libya, Iraq, Syria, all the regions are currently in flames, specifically Saudi Arabia. There have been 300 bombings plus that have taken place within Saudi Arabia for the past month and a half.
Yeah.
The fact that al-Nusra is now advancing in southern Lebanon, all these dynamics are affecting what is happening on the ground. And with ISIS expanding its footprint, spreading to include in Garland, Texas, trying to kill American citizens, if you don't have a strategy to kill them, you cannot support the Sunni, Shia, or the Christian within the region.
Where are the other countries in the region? Where is Saudi Arabia? Where is Jordan? Where are these other players in the area? It seems Iran is really the ascendant player.
Iran is an ascendant player currently. What has happened, my company, the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement, does look at all these issues on the ground. We predicted that Saudi was going to go through political change in 30 days, and they have. Saudi probably will not survive past September. That being the case also with al-Nusra recently bombing the Iranian embassy in Damascus, you're probably looking at Bashar al-Assad probably having to leave power or maybe even be killed while he's in his position somewhat or in the next 6 months. That timeline may have shifted to the left now, given what's happening. Southern Lebanon is going to be in flames with al-Nusra fighting against ISIS, which is also fighting currently against Hezbollah. Hezbollah losses are probably going to suck in Israel to have to move into southern Lebanon. All these dynamics are happening because there's no coherent strategy into the region. So when you say we're going to tweak it, you have no clue what's going on within the region. At the tactical level, people want to see an American decisive footprint within the region, however it is, either military or whether it be diplomatic, but you have to have some guidance for your coalition forces so they can support your strategy within the region.
No, it seems the American strategy has not only been scattershot, but schizophrenic. I mean, we backed, the United States at one time wanted Assad out of the way. If Assad were out of the way today, all of Syria would be under ISIS's control instead of 60%. What are the chances of Assad holding on in Syria, and what impact will that have on the religious freedom of the Christians there?
The Christians are already wiped out of Syria, I hate to say it. When the 37 villages of the Khabar River Valley got cleansed out, those are the main nodes that feed supplies between Al-Raqqa, which is capital of ISIS, and to Mosul. So the Mosul fight is going to be difficult too. They're not getting that footprint back. They're done. Bashar al-Assad is probably not going to survive more than 6 months. That's just a reality. Al-Nusra is going to take hold, and Al-Nusra takes hold. These are the same individuals, I hate to say it, last year they were killing individuals and they were eating their hearts on the battlefield, and we're going to have to supply them with weapons. That makes no sense. You have to find enduring partners. In this case, you have the Christians on the ground who are fighting with the Sunni Kurds in order to fight against ISIL. They're fighting with the Sunni Arabs and also with the Shiite in Iraq in order to hold their grounds. Support these type of coalition force capabilities on the ground, give them direct weapons, give them a small amount of money, and allow them to be able to hold their ground. The reality of your other coalition partners is that you have partners who are supplying ISIS while they're bombing them at the same time. That's not going to be able to get you where you need to be.
Cardinal Sangari, we keep hearing this. I've heard this for months. We are arming the wrong folks. Why isn't Congress getting this message? Why are they so unwilling to arm the clearly victimized minorities here, particularly that Christian minority that is willing to take up, at this point, arms to protect their families and what's left of their homeland?
The problem you run into is how the State Department is feeding them information. State Department has absolutely no eyes and ears on the ground, and how it receives information, digests it, and feeds it through its network is not working. The same thing with the DoD. Our assets are limited. The issue was when I was downrange years ago, 10 years ago, that how we were structured between the Department of Defense and Department of State, we really were not able to accomplish a mission that was given to us at that time by the Bush administration. The reality is that some of those systems still haven't changed. You have to legislate that change. The reality becomes when that is what we have to deal with at the tactical operational level and even strategic, many lobby groups end up affecting our congressional beliefs, and in this case, our strategic policy becomes what is poked at. specifically for us to get a mission accomplished on the ground. From the Middle Eastern perspective, as I said, when Abu Sayyaf was taken out, most of the Middle East believes that he was taken out only because the oil companies needed him taken out. That's not the message you want to send to your coalition forces on the ground, but that's how they're viewing it.
Colonel Sangari, tell me your thoughts on, you told us what the Christian community looks like in Syria. What is the condition of the Christians in Iraq? And isn't this genocide by ISIS almost complete in reality?
Well, it was almost complete. 100 years ago, when the Armenian, Assyrian, and the Greek genocide took place, 750,000 Assyrians were butchered. Now, I will tell you, when they were killed, Turkey, Ottoman Turkey, was the main force that allowed that to happen, but the majority of them were killed at the hands of the Kurdish Sunni for the Assyrians in the villages that were in the Hakkari mountain areas. That being the case, 100 years later, the Christian Assyrians are still willing to work and even fight under the Kurdish Peshmerga flag with those Kurdish Sunnis to defeat ISIS. Currently, you don't have a footprint anymore. You had an Assyrian army that was established. It was 12 guys who started it after the Mosul fight was a failure, where the Shiite loaded up in 2 C-130s and their commanders abandoned the battlefield in the middle of the night. The Kurds pulled out from that region. The Sunnis who did not want to join ISIS ran into Assyrian villages in the suburbs of Mosul for protection. And then finally, when the ISIS moved into their villages, Assyrians told them, keep our houses, and they left the region. Currently, you have 660,000 estimated refugees in Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Turkey. Those refugees need to be able to get back to claim their lands. The only way they can do it if you arm them directly. When KRG leadership came here to United States a week ago, they said, do not give weapons that is supposed to be coming to us to back that central government. Give it to us because it's not making it to us. Imagine that the Assyrians have to wait for Baghdad to receive weapons on the foreign military sales, be given to the Kurds, and the Kurds who don't want even trust central government in Baghdad to give them the weapons, to turn around and give the Assyrians weapons so they can fight on their own command and control in order to establish their own self-governance within the region.
You know, it's remarkable.
You've got to use, yes.
We are seeing, I mean, just to bring us up to date, we only have 2 minutes here. The abandonment of Ramadi, apparently there, you had Iraqi forces abandoning their posts and the American weaponry right there on the ground, and they were running for their lives. This is a waste of not only our resources, but they seem to be misdirected. But here's my larger question to you, Colonel. How confident are you that the Christians, these Assyrians, and the Kurds can actually hold the Nineveh Plain and these other areas, or repel ISIS from ground they've already taken?
Listen, we keep on giving money to the wrong people. The reality is money has never beaten ideology. ISIS has an ideology. You could give money to the other forces. If you don't give it to the Christians, they're not going to fight. The Assyrian Christians have been there for 7,000 years. They've been Christian for 2,000 of those 7,000 years. They fought both on the Iraqi side and the Iranian side during the Iran-Iraq War. 50,000 of them were killed in combat operations. 65% plus of those were shot in the back by the same militaries that they served under Saddam and also under the Islamic Republic. The reason they died and they held their territory was because it's their land, it's their historical land. People will fight for their historical land, but they will not fight just for money.
Good point. We will leave it there. Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari, thank you so much for your insight. And you are also the founder of the United Syrian Appeal, which is working to provide aid to the Assyrian military, the families of soldiers who are fighting against ISIS. You can visit their website at unitedassyrianappeal.org. Colonel, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
When the World Over returns, is free speech being silenced in the United States? Columnist and author KRISTEN Powers will tell us when the World Over continues. You don't want to miss this. Stay right there.
Their communications have been reduced, their funding and financial mechanisms have been reduced, and their movements, by and large, most certainly where there are air patrols and other capacities, have been reduced. But that's not everywhere. And so it is possible to have the kind of attack we've seen in Ramadi, but I am absolutely confident in the days ahead that will be reversed.
Welcome back to The World Over. That was Secretary of State John Kerry speaking about the fall of Ramadi at the hands of ISIS. To comment on the ongoing religious persecution in the Middle East, the stifling of diverse voices in the public square, and much more. We're very pleased to be joined by USA Today columnist, Fox News contributor, former Clinton administration appointee, and author of the New York Times bestseller, The Silencing: How the Left is Killing Free Speech. Please welcome KRISTEN Powers.
Hi,
Great
it's
to have you on.
Here. I love being here.
Let's start with that bite from Secretary Kerry. Are you confident that they can reverse the gains of ISIS in Iraq?
Well, I think they're going to have to probably come up with some sort of strategy, which I have yet to see. And what I'm reminded of when I hear this is all the talk about how Al-Qaeda was on the run and they had basically defeated Al-Qaeda. And it sounds very familiar, right? You know, where they're trying to deny reality and deny how serious this is.
You have written a great deal about religious persecution in your column over the last, really, few years.
Yeah.
And turned a spotlight, I think, on this issue for so many people who otherwise just hadn't even considered it. There is a personal edge to this in that you had your own conversion, a reversion really, to Christianity.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Was there a turning point? Was there something
I mean, it really was a conversion because I was raised Episcopalian and it was, you know, I believed in God, but it wasn't a really serious faith. And so it was much later in my life, I started dating somebody basically who kind of threatened to break up with me if I didn't start going to church.
There's always a guy behind the conversion.
He was really brilliant, and I thought, you know, if he believes this, maybe there's something to it. I didn't think, I said, there's no chance I'll ever become a Christian, but, you know, I'll start going to church. And so I started going to this church in New York City, Tim Keller's church, Redeemer Presbyterian. And it's a church really where it's a seeker church where he really makes the case for Christianity. And I went there and sort of was captivated by the talks, but in a kind of like, this is interesting kind of way, but not, I'm never going to believe it. And over a year of going there and listening to him, I, you know, really reluctantly, honestly, realized that I believed it.
There is a vivid experience that happens to you in like 2006 in Taiwan, of all places.
Yeah.
What happened?
I was in Taiwan on a kind of a work trip, and I was praying a lot. I had been praying a lot with that boyfriend for God to reveal Himself to me, though I didn't really understand what that meant.
Yeah.
And I didn't really think it would happen. And I just had what was sort of a dream, I guess, where Jesus came to me and just said, "Here I am." And I just was. It was so powerful, and I didn't know what to make of it. And so then I actually reached out to my friend Eric Metaxas, who you may know, who was probably the only evangelical Christian I knew at that point. He was friends with that boyfriend, and it turns out he became a believer through a dream. And so he said, "No, you're not imagining things. You need to get into a Bible study." And I was very reluctant. You know, it was a big change in my life. I lived in a very secular, liberal world, atheist world, and so I said, Bible study? I don't know. This sounds kind of weird, you know. And I ended up going to that Bible study, and I just walked out of there. I mean, it's not because of anything that actually was said. I don't know what happened. I just sort of walked out of there, and I was like, wow, it's just completely true. And I just, and then that was 8 years ago.
And it changed, obviously, it changed your perspective, changed the lens through which you've seen the world.
Yes.
Are you stunned by the failure of this administration, as well as members of Congress, to focus on what's happened to these Christians in the cradle of Christianity in the Middle East?
Yes.
There seems to be no regard, or frankly, any regret about American actions that caused all of this.
Right. Yeah. No, it's amazing how few people, especially considering how many people identify as Christians, and not that you should only care about Christians, but the fact that you are having this religious persecution where people have been driven from their homes. You know, you have beheadings, you have people living in refugee camps, and yet you have very few people. Congressman Frank Wolf really was one of the only voices who sadly is retiring, and then you also have President Obama, who's not only not speaking out about it, but then, you know, taking the time to bring up the Crusades and things like this at the exact time that Christians are literally being driven out of the birthplace of Christianity.
No, it's stunning. I mean, it's just stunning watching it. Do you still consider yourself a liberal?
I do, yeah.
Because it seems to me, I'm saying that when I was reading the book, I kept thinking, you know, I worked for a time for Bob Novak, who considered himself and was an agnostic, democratic liberal. And Bob always said, I didn't move to the right. My party moved away from me.
Yeah.
Is that what's happening to KRISTEN Powers?
Well, I'm sorry, it's not. Well, because the thing about it is in my book, I talk about what I call the illiberal left.
Yes.
And these are the people who are really clamping down, I think, on free speech and silencing people. And I actually agree with them on a lot of policy issues.
Okay.
So it's not an issue of, you know, I supported Obamacare. On immigration, I'm probably on the same side with them. I'm, you know, raising taxes on the rich. On all these different policy issues, we're on the same side. Where we differ is on this idea that you have to silence people rather than debating them.
Right.
That the debate is over, that they've decided that everybody, you know, I support same-sex marriage. And a lot of the people they're trying to silence are people who don't support same-sex marriage.
You have a line in the book
yeah.
here. You have a line in the book, it's early on in the book, and you talk about modern McCarthyism and say, quote, how ironic that today there is a left-wing crusade to expel from positions of authority anyone who opposes same-sex marriage. The McCarthyite impulse has come full circle. What is that? Why is that?
Right.
Why not have an open, honest debate about these issues? Not only same-sex marriage, everything.
Right. Well, because I think that there's a very authoritarian impulse behind this. These are people who have decided that they know the truth, capital T truth, and that and that they're kind of doing a favor for everybody. That people shouldn't be exposed to views that they think are wrong, and that they're going to shut down these debates because they are so certain of their rightness and the other people's wrongness that they feel that they're righteous. They actually feel righteous in silencing people.
Any concern about writing a book like this as your first time out the box?
Yeah.
I mean, there had to be some hesitation.
Yeah. Well, it was such an important issue to me, and I value free speech and debate so much. I grew up in a very liberal family, academic parents, and I just started to notice that a lot of things were happening where people were being silenced, and I started looking into it, and I just realized that this was a real cultural trend, and I felt like it was something that I needed to write about. Now, before I wrote the book, I didn't really think about it. When I was writing the book, I started to go, oh.
Uh-oh. You started feeling the eyes passing by the windows?
Because what you'll know since you read the book, that it's not just about silencing conservatives.
Right.
There are tons of examples in the book of liberals,
where liberals are also
feminists,
targeted.
of moderate Democrats. It's anybody.
Tell me about the targeting. What are the tactics used? You talk about the delegitimization. What does that mean? How is that accomplished?
It's basically they use just different tactics. So if you oppose same-sex marriage, they're not going to have a debate with you about that. They're going to call you a homophobe and a bigot, which kind of makes you a little toxic to society. If you're pro-life, they're going to call you a misogynist and say that you hate women. If you are somebody who questions campus rape statistics, as a few brave people have, they're called rape deniers, or that they're enabling rape culture. And so they will go, so it so undermines the people's ability to speak out, and it chills speech because other people see it happening and they think, well, I don't want to say how I think because then they're going to call me a homophobe.
I'm going to get dragged into the public square and flogged and labeled as something horrible.
And never be able to recover.
And it's a blood sport. And here in D.C., this is a blood sport. It's all personal. It's destroy the opponent. And what do you do? Here's the real question.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, I think the first thing is to really expose it. And when I was starting to talk about people when I was writing the books, people would go, oh, that's just one kook here, one kook there. And I said, no, this is an across-the-board systematic issue that's going on. And I wanted to really put it all in one place so that people couldn't say that anymore. They couldn't say that this is just the occasional incident. And in fact, I had to cut multiple chapters. There were so many examples. It wasn't one of these things where I had to dig around. And most of the examples come from the last couple years.
Yeah, no, it's contemporary stuff. You must be feeling a little heat from fellow liberals, not only for being a Fox News contributor, which I'm sure
they love it.
I'm sure they just adore. You're invited to all the parties, but you recount a story here where you're seated next to dear little old Gloria Steinem. God bless her. She was very warm and welcoming to you. Tell me about that lovely interview.
Oh, she just said to me, she just leans over and she says, "Why do you go on Fox News?" And I actually don't remember what my response was. And then I said, and then she said, "But it comes at such a great cost."
To whom?
To me, apparently. And I said, you know, I just disagree. I said, I think that you should go places where people disagree with you, and I think you should go on. I think there are a lot of people who would be surprised, actually, that they have a caricature of you and don't understand, you know, who you are. I mean, whatever you think of her, she's actually a brilliant woman, you know. And so I said, you know, you should be going on. She said, I would never go on Fox News. And it just was like, what is the problem here? I don't. Like, why do you have to? Well, it's part of the delegitimizing, though,
right.
because I think she would see it as her legitimizing. Like, they see that as their role, that we're not going to legitimize something. We're going to just, you know, pretend that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it has a chilling effect, not only on dialogue in the country, but everybody is cheated. Because, look, we've had the challenge. A few weeks ago, we had a climate change debate. You've got thousands of people saying climate change is human caused. Fine, let's have a conversation about it. You only have a handful of people opposing this, yet they're willing to show up. The people who are supporting this won't come to the table. We finally found one brave woman willing to come and make the case. Why is that? And is that healthy for a republic?
It's not healthy for a republic. You cannot have freedom, first of all, without knowledge, and you can't have knowledge without debate. And so, you know, I think that I mean, it's an authoritarian attitude that they really believe that they have it figured out, and they don't have to debate it, and they don't have to convince anybody. And the same thing is happening on the campus rape statistics, where you have somebody like Christina Hoff Sommers from, you know, AEI, where you have her going to campuses, and they're trying to keep her off of the campus rather than debating her. And she's saying, I'm happy to talk about this, but you know, just the existence of her is something that requires trigger warnings and safe spaces, and you know, rather than coming in and debating her, which she's more than happy to do.
It's amazing. What has surprised you about the reaction to this book from fellow liberals? Let's start there.
Yeah. Well, it shouldn't have surprised me that one of the first attacks was that, first of all, lying, that I had taken money from the Heritage Foundation because they ran an excerpt of my book. But, you know, the Daily Beast also ran a bunch of excerpts. So it wasn't, I was giving them to a lot of different people. And so the fact that I had done that, then that was proof that I was like a right-wing mouthpiece. Which I talk about in the book, how they do that to journalists, that they try to, they basically say if you even talk to a Republican, it's proof that you are on their side. The really surprising one was getting attacked by gay rights people who know how pro-gay rights I am, calling me a homophobe because I talk about Brendan Ike of Mozilla in the book and how he was pushed out of his job, and I defend his right to hold that position and to give money to Proposition 8, something I opposed. You know, but I support his right to do that. I don't think you should lose your job over it.
You see, I mean, tolerance and diversity means allowing viewpoints and people you might disagree with.
Exactly.
And they're allowed to breathe the same air and make their argument in the public square. Let the people decide. I mean, that's how I feel about all these issues, every one of them. Let's talk about some things that are bubbling up now. And I know you've been on this grueling book tour, but
there are other things happening in the world.
It's a KRISTEN Powers quiz. Think of it that way. Senator Rand Paul had this little minor filibuster on the floor the other day. It wasn't minor, it was like 11 hours, over the NSA collecting our phone records. He said this. Listen.
There comes a time in the history of nations when fear and complacency allow power to accumulate and liberty and privacy to suffer. That time is now, and I will not let the Patriot Act, the most unpatriotic of acts, go unchallenged. At the very least, we should debate. We should debate whether or not we are going to relinquish our rights, or whether or not we are going to have a full and able debate over whether or not we can live within the Constitution, or whether or not we have to go around the Constitution.
Your thought on this? This seems to be one of those nonpartisan questions.
I couldn't agree with him more. Absolutely, 100%. And he's been a great voice on this issue, I think, and that that we need to be much more careful about giving up our rights. I mean, obviously, I agree with him about needing to debate things. But I do think that people I think, are too quick to say, like, well, let's just let them, have to keep us safe. And it's like, I personally don't want the government going through my records. That's just me.
No, well, it's privacy. We should be entitled to some privacy.
They need to
worry about, and you have people saying, but the NSA is to be trusted.
Oh,
this is safe.
Right. The government's
it's government, guys. I mean, come on. Are you amazed in the last few weeks we've seen such a convergence, bipartisan, if you will, disagreement over this trade issue, the fast-track trade authority for the president, this NSA, these NSA records, that's a healthy impulse, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I love finally people agreeing on something in this
please.
city. Yeah, I mean, because it's been a real frustration that everything has been so partisan for so long.
What's your take on the fast-track trade authority? Bad deal for workers, in your opinion?
Look, I'm pretty pro-free trade, and it is hard for the president. I mean, I worked in the Clinton administration, in full disclosure, in the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. So and as you know, trade was a huge part of the Clinton administration's economic policy. So it is very hard for the president to negotiate a trade agreement if he can't guarantee that it's going to pass. If he's going to go, because there's no way to do it.
Aren't you concerned about so many big businesses and these trade organizations that are behind this? And it does suck our manufacturing base away. It gives them a fast pass out of the country. Doesn't that hurt the workers? Isn't that a core of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why most Democrats have always opposed. I mean, when I was working in the Clinton administration, it really, all of Clinton's major trade initiatives passed with the help of Republicans. I mean, he wouldn't have been be able to do it without them. So, I mean, I'm not 100% in or out on this. I mean, I haven't been actually following this as closely, but I do tend to think that, you know, trade, you're going to be trading with these countries anyway, and so it's good to have some sort of, you know, system where you know, that you've agreed upon. And you know, but I haven't looked at this particular deal.
Last question. I want to talk about these emails that are emerging from Sidney Blumenthal to Hillary Clinton. Blumenthal was working at the time for the Clinton Foundation, getting paid there. He sends emails in advising her on the Benghazi story and what happened and what may have driven it. Concerning for you? Should she come clean with all of these emails?
Well, she should come clean. There's no question. I think there needs to be transparency. The issue is whether or not, I actually don't have a problem with somebody who has a long-standing relationship with somebody who gets advice from them. You know, I think that the question is whether he had access to information that he shouldn't have had access to, because I don't know how he could be giving her a really fully informed opinion if he didn't have the whole story. But if he didn't have access, then that's one story. And if he did have access to classified information, then I think it takes on a whole new meaning.
But I'll bet you agree with me, this will have no impact on anyone's support for Hillary Clinton.
I don't think so.
And I don't think it'll be pursued either.
Yeah,
I mean, you know.
Right. Yeah, I think people have pretty much made up their mind about her for the most part, and then she's going to have to persuade some people in the middle, but Democrats are all in.
KRISTEN Powers, I hope you'll come back sometime.
I will. This was fun.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
The book, The Silencing How the Left is Killing Free Speech by KRISTEN Powers is available at bookstores and online. Bookstores everywhere. Go get it. When we return, this fall the Pope is about to conduct a world meeting of families in Philadelphia. So why the recent addition of a visit to Cuba? Up next, the president of the Pontifical Council for Families, Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, joins us to discuss the visit, his recent speech at the UN, and a few other matters. When the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. Pope Francis is set to visit the U.S. in September, but not before a stopover in Cuba. To explain the additional visit, we spoke earlier to the president of the Pontifical Council for the Family, Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia. In addition to his Vatican responsibilities, Paglia is also the postulator of the cause of Oscar Romero, who will be beatified this weekend. We explored it all with him, as well as his recent speech at the UN. According to Crux, Paglia praised the ABC show Modern Family for raising family issues. He said that, quote, phenomena like the media production Modern Family or same-sex marriage initiatives in a significant number of jurisdictions, the family has become the subject of increasingly intense interest and discussion. We got into that as well. Here's my exclusive interview with Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia. I want to start with the meeting with families to take place in Philadelphia in September. It was just announced that the Holy Father has decided to add a 4-day visit to Cuba on the front end of the United States visit. If the purpose of coming here was to take part in this meeting for families and he really wanted to focus on that, why put the Cuba visit on the front end of the visit to the U.S.?
So, you know, the first reason for the Pope to come in the United States remains obviously Philadelphia. But the importance of this country for the world pushed the Pope to enlarge his visit, and the last time, because of the event of the history who grew up, decided to start with his visit in Cuba, then to Washington to meet the Catholic bishops, then to speak to the Congress, then at the United Nations. And the trip, the Philadelphia concludes this great and historical journey of the Pope Francis.
Archbishop, but wouldn't it have made more sense to start with the papal visit to the World Meeting with Families, to accent that first? The danger is, by the time he goes to Cuba for 4 days, Congress, the President, then he goes to the UN, the Philadelphia event might seem an afterthought to many in the media, at least.
Yeah, I think that in any case, Philadelphia would conclude this trip. And the importance of this family meeting is its link with the Synod of Bishops, which happened exactly 7 days after. In this sense, we have to think about Philadelphia as a bridge between the previous steps with the Congress and the United Nations and Cuba, and then the importance for the whole Catholic Church of the Synod on the family.
Archbishop, as you bring up the Synod on the Family, your colleague, Cardinal George Pell, head of the Economic Secretariat there at the Vatican, he made the comment to a pro-life group that he expects this Synod will massively endorse church teaching and church practice, even the practice of receiving the Eucharist under the traditional, within the traditional aspects. Do you agree with him that the Synod will reaffirm those practices as well as teachings?
Do you know, I don't know exactly, and the Synod is realized exactly to reflect on this matter. Surely we have to increase our pastoral engagement. The doctrine is clear. Surely we have to increase a lot our closeness to all kind of families, to families in a good health, to families blessed, and everywhere you have some signs. In this sense, I think that we have to enlarge our vision. We have to be sure that the Pope will lead us in order to push a new spring of families. In this sense, we have to avoid some too ideological perspectives. We have to increase in our pastoral attitude, because now it's not time only to some theoretical description. The Pope wants to push the Church and the believers to see the reality of families. We have to show the mercy of God for everyone. We need family.
So we
need all families.
So if I'm interpreting what you're saying, you think there's still some latitude here. You don't share Cardinal Pell's conviction that there will be no change in practice or doctrine.
You know, the doctrine can be enlarged. We can go deeply. John 23rd used to say, it's not the gospel who change, but us understand better the gospel. This has to be during the 3 weeks in the discussion among bishops. In this sense, we don't change. We would like to go deeply. We would like to find good words in order to announce the gospel of family in the contemporary world.
Your Excellency, there was a report last week when you addressed the UN, and the way that Crux, which is an internet site owned by the Boston Globe, they suggested that you were complimenting and praising this Modern Family show, which is a sitcom here in the United States. Were you praising that particular program?
So I suggested, and I emphasize a lot this point. In my opinion, all governments have to understand that the family is an indispensable resource of our societies. I say in a synthesis, strong family means strong society. Feeble families, feeble societies. In this sense, the traditional family, that is mother, father, children, grandparents, grandchildren, so as the real engine of our society, because the family is the first school of solidarity, the first school of living together among different people. We need this. In this sense, the current society needs more family, nor less.
So just to clarify, so you agree with that report? You were praising the Modern Family show?
These are not the heart of the question. This is a peripheral question. The real problem is the majority of a normal, ordinary family who continues to sustain our societies. In this sense, we have to remember, and the Church, the Pope Francis, in this sense, pinpoint the question, and he asked to all church, all Catholic Church, to put in the center of the concern the family. In my opinion, all societies, all governments, all people of culture have to bring again family as the heart of our society. In this sense, we can surely have a great debate around other questions, but if we run the risk to forget the art, we will have a feeble societies.
Okay, final question. I know you're the postulator of the Oscar Romero cause, which is moving now, and he will be proclaimed a saint. There are still questions, and we see this popping up in some of the media accounts, questions that he may have embraced liberation theology. You would say what to those charges? And that was the reason he was killed, because of his political actions rather than as a matter of faith.
You know, Romero used to say that he followed the Paul VI theological liberation. That is the integral liberation, not only political, either a sort of Marxist analysis. Romero wanted to help the poor people in the name of Jesus, in the name of the gospel. In this sense, he chose to stay with his people in order to defend his dignity, to promote justice, to promote peace. And the persecutors wanted to push Romero to be silent. And that's why they killed him.
Archbishop, thank you so much for being with us, and we hope to see you again perhaps next time when we're in Rome.
Thank you to you and all viewers.
Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links or at RaymondArroyo.com. And tell me what you thought of tonight's show. I'm on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo. And don't miss our next show. We'll talk to the very funny columnist and author Dave Barry about his latest children's book, The Worst Class Trip Ever, and much more. Until next time, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.